Hey everyone, this is Chris. Welcome back to the channel. So I want to have a chat with you guys about the Bank England stuff, what's going on with cryptocurrency, because it's all related, and why I need to be a little bit mean today. And the reason is because you're going to get a lot of different opinions on this stuff. But before frank, most people on YouTube don't understand what the heck is going on. And in fact, they're high school educated. And like I said, I have to be a little bit mean, but it's real. And then the people on TV, right? You have a lot of journalists and stuff. They probably have a semblance of a grasp, but they're just told what essentially their producers and their handlers are telling them what to say. And then you have people actually do understand this stuff, right? People with PhDs in economics and stuff like that. But if they're involved with the governments, and this is everywhere around the world, they're most likely just lying to you. And so it's very difficult to get good information on this stuff for all of these different reasons. And I'm just telling you how it is. I was a professor for 10 years, and our job as a professor, if we're doing our job correctly, is to provide you with information and help you to like understand things. And there's also varying degrees of, how good a professor is. So anyway, I just want to get that disclaimer out because I want you to understand sort of my point of view on this and where I'm coming from. Let's start with this. So I want to look at the definition of Ponzi scheme. Like, why are we talking about this? You'll see. It all makes sense. Okay, so this is Ponzi scheme. Definition. A Ponzi scheme is a fraudulent investing scam promising high rates of return with little risk to investors. A Ponzi scheme is a fraudulent investing scam which generates returns for earlier investors with money taking from later investors, right? So the key is people who are early will make money as long as people who come later put more money into the system, right? This is similar to a pyramid scheme, and both are used based on new investors' money to pay earlier backers, right? So again, you need new money or there's no money. That's the general idea of a Ponzi pyramid. Let's just read this. A pyramid scheme, how does it work? A pyramid scheme is a fraudulent and here's a key word, unsustainable investment pitch that relies on promising unrealistic returns from imaginary investments. I'm laughing because when you understand what we're talking about here, it's actually really funny. The earlier investors actually get paid those big returns, which leads them to recommend the scheme to others. And investors' returns are paid out, new money flowing in. Eventually, no new investors can be found, and the pyramid collapses. Right. So I think you guys kind of have a general sense of what this stuff is, either Ponzi or pyramid. But I want you to understand that I am relating the Bank of England and what's going on over there to Ponzi and pyramid scheme. And you're like, what is going on? Why isn't no one talking about this? Because people aren't really telling you the truth, and that's why I'm saying I'm telling you guys the truth. And the truth is scary, actually, to be perfectly frank. Let's move on. And so I'll build my case, and you guys can make up your own mind. So let's talk about Kathy Wood and ARK. Basically, she's saying, hey, everybody, Bitcoin's going to be, what's she saying? $1 million for one Bitcoin by 2030. And it's going to be, by 2026, it's going to be 500K. So, I guess we still have a chance, right? So her projection could still be true. 3 years from now, Bitcoin hits 500K, right? The basic gist of it, though, is that she's not stupid by any stretch of imagination. She is not a stupid person. But does being stupid or smart, does that have any relation to your morality, right? So you guys see what I'm saying? So she's smart enough to know, however you want to define smart, to know that if I lie to people and tell people that, this basically fake asset, cryptocurrency or fake money is going to go to the moon, then suddenly, oh my God, you're so smart, and people start buying into it, and then it becomes real, right? It's a Ponzi or pyramid, right? So people do make money on this stuff, but it's often built on a lie. The same way, this is real, guys. I'm just making stuff up, and people are gonna get mad. Oh man, you're just hating on Trump. But I'm just talking real stuff here. Trump promised you that they're gonna build a wall, and Mexico's gonna pay for it, right? That's the key. Mexico's gonna pay for it. How did that turn out, right? Was that real? Are we even in the realm of reality? Can someone actually force Mexico to pay for a wall? Obviously you guys know that you can't really force them. And they had an election. He won because he made these ridiculous promises. The same way Kathy Wood promised you Bitcoin's going to go to $1 million. Trump says Mexico's going to pay for the wall. Trump actually won. And it's kind of interesting. So he won in the electoral, but he lost in the popular vote, right? You guys can see the numbers for yourselves. So not everyone bought it, but the way our system works, people did. We had the same thing kind of in England. So basically, people out there are promising, hey everyone, we're gonna leave the EU because man, those EU people, those Europeans and other countries, there's a drain in our system, and we're gonna be able to fund healthcare, and we're gonna be funding all these things, and we're gonna be so much better if we just leave them. So, and I laugh, and because it works, right? You got to tell these people this stuff because it works, and 51% voted to leave, and 48% voted to remain. So what does this all have to do? Why do we have to go through this history? Because you have to understand sort of how do we get to this point, right? We don't just wake up one day and our economic system is like messed up. It doesn't happen. It goes in stages. It goes over time. But you have to understand that you have to get the building blocks of this whole system before you can really tackle it. We had COVID hit. You guys know this. And this was during a period where at that moment, like interest rates were low around the world because we're coming out, and this was a while ago already. Remember, 2008, 2009, we're coming out of basically a big fiscal crisis, and the idea was that we would set interest rates low so that we could encourage people to borrow money and put money into the system and keep borrowing money and put money in the system, et cetera, and grow economies in this regard. Also, too, we were also promised that our fiscal policy and our banking system, everything's good. We fixed all the mistakes of the past. No reason to panic. And I think this coronavirus stuff really shook the system because one, we had to shut down a lot of things, right? And two, government started doing stuff just to please people. We just started giving people money to make people happy, essentially. We have a war in Ukraine, right? You guys know this. This also is another huge shock to the world economy. So basically, we're rupturing supply lines. We're raising the price of fuel. And also, too, just people are fighting, which is never a good thing. This is really not. I don't want anyone fighting anywhere. I've made this really clear several times. But this is really, all of these things put together is really going to start to expose sort of the problems in our system. And one of the main problems in our system is the belief that we don't need anyone else. I'll just put it real simple. It's the belief that we don't need other people, and the belief that we can just stop trading, and the belief that you're going to have crazy big returns and you're all going to be rich without any sort of repercussions of anything else. And that's why it's kind of like a Ponzi or pyramid. It's right to promise these big returns. And remember, you always need new money into the system. So here's the deal here is that England is struggling after Brexit because when they left the EU, it just cut off a lot of trade relations and also cut off a lot of labor relations, meaning that the flow of workers between countries, right? You need workers to get your system to go. Also, too, in any system, some workers don't get paid as much as other workers. It's just the reality. Some workers are, paid really, really poorly or cheaply, however you want to say it, because their skills aren't worth that much money. And some workers are paid more because their skills are worth money. However, there is a caveat in the system to where it's completely unfair, where the government will actually, and they'll do this in UK, they will actually subsidize certain industries, meaning that even though these particular workers maybe not have particular skills that are that useful or valuable in terms of free market, but the government will give money to support those said industries. Now, the other thing, too, that can happen as well is government can set policy on who pays for basically salaries of other people. And this is just real, right? I'm not giving my opinion once. This is just real. So what you would do in this situation, then you would tax people who have money, and then you give that money to other people, redistribution of wealth, right? I think you guys get this basic concept of taxes. Now, what happens, though, is that the conservative argument would be if you tax people too much, then they don't want to work anymore, or you tax people too much and they don't want to hire any more people, et cetera. It just slows down growth. There's a lot of arguments on this kind of stuff. So what they're doing is they're like, okay, our system doesn't work. We left from Brexit, but they're not going to tell anyone that Brexit was a failure. No one's going to say that, right? Because remember, you're getting elected because you made all these promises based on Brexit. And now you're like, okay, what we're going to do now, after COVID, after the Putin situation, our economy system is ruptured, we're just going to give massive tax breaks and let the free market decide. and the problem with this was, though, is that it was like the biggest tax breaks in 50 years. So it was ridiculously big, right? So, you can adjust policies one way or the other. But when you do policies too big, it's just a major, major shock to the system because it takes time for things to adjust. And also, too, suddenly you got to figure out, okay, how are you going to pay for it? And so what do we mean by how to pay for it? Okay, so in any government, in any business, um, the basic way how things should work is that you bring in money, right? And you use that money to pay for things, okay? Now, what's crazy about what our whole economic system, this goes back to pyramid or Ponzi, is let's say I'm not bringing in enough money to pay for things, okay? I'm just not bringing enough money. So, for example, I cut taxes and suddenly I'm not bringing in enough money to pay for my government things. So, what you can do then is you can actually borrow money, right? And you can essentially issue bonds, but it's make it real simple. You can borrow money to pay for things that you want to pay for. And you guys know this as well as your home, situation. If you want to buy a car, you don't have enough money, you borrow money to pay for that car, and then you pay an interest rate on that, and then the bank makes money on the interest rate, right? This is basic things. But I want you to understand these basic things because it all builds up, right? So culturally, this idea of borrowing money to pay for things, and it's money that we don't have. And the issue becomes here of sort of why the UK economy is in question and why the pound is sinking, is that when you're cutting taxes so much and you're also paying for things like you're going to give a bunch of money, say, to the energy companies, or you're going to just, for example, give a bunch of money to miners to keep them, their industry subsidized, which makes sense if you want to keep mining within your own country and you don't want to trade, right? Basically, you're trying to keep a system afloat with borrowed money. This is the whole thing. That's why I mentioned Ponzi scheme in the very beginning, right? It's all about borrowed money. And the issue is that people lose faith in you, lose faith in your system when it doesn't seem like it's sustainable. That's why I talked about pyramid. It's not a sustainable system. Because where does your money get its value? Your money gets its value from people believing in it. I mean, that's essentially what it is. And you can make the case that all money is fake money in a way, right? You can make that case. This is sort of why people were retreating to the dollar, because they just don't believe in the UK system anymore. They don't believe people are going to essentially pay back the money. Because remember, everything's based on borrowed money. The government is borrowing money from banks and from you, essentially, to fund the things that they want to do. And then the idea is that they're going to pay you back with what? This is where the Ponzi is. And people say, okay, I don't believe you're going to pay us back. Why? Remember, because they're cutting taxes, right? So they're not bringing enough money. And so people were really, really worried that they're just going to just print money out of thin air, which is a thing that a government can do. And this is sort of gets back into the crypto situation to where people say, oh, I love Bitcoin because we know people can't just print Bitcoin whenever they want. That's the argument for crypto for the argument for Bitcoin, not for all crypto, because in fact, most crypto they can just print whenever they want, and it's really risky. And I'm sure people in the comments are like, "Oh, Chris, you're so stupid. You don't understand crypto." But I'm telling you, this is the whole basic gist of it, is that people want a money supply that they don't feel like can just be printed at any moment and essentially be diluted, right? Meaning that your ownings, either your pound or your dollar, your yen, your yuan, will become worthless because people print more. And when you print more of something, something becomes worthless because there's too much supply of something, right? And so people are losing faith. Now, what's going on is when people lose faith in the system, inflation starts to go up as more and more money essentially ejected into the system. And you guys kind of know the whole inflation deal. And like I said, I'm sorry, guys, this is a complicated system. I'm trying my best to keep on the same train of thought. We had these fiscal policies, a couple things. One, we're printing money, and two, we're keeping interest rates low. When interest rates are low, more and more people are borrowing money. And this whole premise of borrowing money is that banks will lend you money because they think they're going to pay you back. Or I lend you money because I think you're going to pay me back, and I'm going to collect an interest on that. I'm sure you guys know this thing. Now, what happens if you're not sure what interest rates are going to be? Because your central bank and the central bank in any country sets the rate, the percentage, right, of what people are going to be borrowing money for, or what banks are going to be borrowing money from each other. They just kind of say, hey, that's our policy and that's what it is and we're sticking to it. The basic just here, though, was in the UK that the banks weren't lending money anymore to buy homes because the economy was so shaky and they weren't sure what interest rates were going to do. And so it just wasn't feasible for them because at the end of the day, these banks are actually private businesses and they want to make money. Remember, they make money from lending out money and make money from essentially you paying them back. But if no one's paying anybody back, this is where it becomes a pyramid or a Ponzi, right? And this goes back up to this whole Bank of England thing. What's going on? The basic gist of it is that banks are buying debt from each other. Essentially, that's essentially what it is. So what does this mean, buying debt? I want you guys to wrap your head around this and why it's a Ponzi/pyramid. Okay, So let's say, for example, I'm a bank and I lend you money, okay? And you're going to pay me back, right? And what happens is that that sort of contract that we have between you and I, it's worth something, right? Maybe it's worth 3% a year, maybe it's worth 4% a year, 5% a year, whatever. It's worth something. And the worth of this thing actually matters. It relates to inflation, right? It relates to how much is money worth as a whole, and also relates to your ability to pay it back, and also relates to the faith in the whole economic system as a whole. Now, what happens is that if no one's lending money at all, the Bank of England's kind of like, okay, crap, no one's lending any money anymore. We need people to keep lending money, essentially, because we need to keep this system going. We need people to be buying things. We need people to be buying houses. We need people to go shopping. We need people to do all these things. And we're worried that people are, in fact, are losing faith in our system and frankly just buying the dollar because they actually do believe in the Americans that their system will keep working and someone's going to pay someone back, right? So England's like, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to buy a whole bunch of debt from banks, essentially. And in turn, remember, when you buy like that contract, then the Bank of England is giving a bunch of cash to said banks, okay? Now, those said banks, remember, now Bank of England has a bunch of these contracts, essentially, and the banks have a bunch of cash. Those banks can then lend out a whole bunch of cash to other people and try to keep the cycle going. This is where the worry is, though, is that what if people don't pay back those banks? What if that doesn't happen? And the other thing that people are worried about is that the Bank of England at any moment can say, okay, so in order to sort of get the system going again, we're just going to print more money because I get it, right? The banks don't have enough money to pay us back. The people don't have enough money to pay the banks back. So how about we just give people money and pretend like that makes any sense at all, right? And I hope you guys understand this whole thing of why I started with pyramid, why I started with Ponzi, and why I'm trying my best to explain this stuff to you, because most people aren't going to understand it at all, right? And the other thing, too, people on TV, people on government stuff, they're not really going to tell you the truth. They say, oh, well, you know what we're doing here? We're making policy in order to get it so that you can buy your houses, right? Or we're making policy to get it so that you can go buy your new car, right? They'll put it in the most simplest terms possible. But at the end of the day, though, is you do want to keep sort of a control, and you also want to have planning for how much your currency is worth and sort of what you want to do about interest rates and how you want to think about inflation. Because the more money essentially that you put in the system, or the more you encourage people to borrow money, it just keeps injecting more money into the system, and prices are going to go up. It's hard to control inflation for these kind of things, right? Or you give businesses more money and then they can pay their workers more, et cetera. But eventually, at the end of the day, someone's got to pay the bill, and it becomes a big Ponzi/pyramid scheme because everybody's borrowing from everybody. And then at the end of the day, maybe the Bank of England says, you know what, we don't have any money to pay anybody back. No one has any money to pay anybody back. So how about we just print more money? That's an easy solution. Just print more money. So I question this whole system because a lot of it is based on lies and essentially politicians promising you things that aren't true, right? And if you don't want to get, we'll keep it, apolitical, right? We won't talk about any particular politician. We'll just talk about Kathy Wood because she's kind of like a politician in a way. It's kind of like someone going out there and saying, hey, everybody, our system is so great. Please give me money. Please believe in me because Bitcoin's going to go to $1 million by 2030. And so this is what the world is. And it's frustrating, and as I told you, most people on YouTube are too stupid to understand anything that's going on. Most people on TV are basically lying to you, essentially, and then politicians are just selling you hopes and dreams. And so this is the world how it is, and this is sort of why I have my point of views that I do, and sort of why I always make jokes about, you got to watch Game of Thrones if you want to understand the world and how it really works. Just at the end of the day, most people out there in the world are just looking out for themselves, looking out to save face. Looking, just to make money for their own, and they don't necessarily care about the sustainability of the system. Our current economic system is unsustainable, and there's going to be a massive crash coming. I don't know when I can't predict that. I can't tell you, oh, tomorrow it's going to crash or strike. I can't tell you, but what I can tell you is that when I see a Ponzi scheme or a pyramid type of scheme, or I can see something that's unsustainable, be it a company that's losing money yet they keep borrowing money and try to, stay open. I can tell you that's unsustainable. So, but how long is anyone's guess. And this is sort of what I'm looking at right now. And everything just seems kind of out of whack at the moment. I lived through .com, I lived through 0809. I've seen the warning signs with China is a very similar thing related to this, to where basically, right, the whole real estate deal is, People are borrowing money to build things, and then people get that money from investors like, oh, okay, I'll build you something, give me some money. And then they take that money and then they go build something else. And then you get a whole bunch of half-built things all around the country. And then suddenly people stop paying. And it's a similar kind of thing we're happening in England. It's a similar thing we're happening around the world. And the other thing is too, is like no one really wants to have an adult conversation about this because it's unpopular and it's uncomfortable, because some people are just going to come out losers in this system. And it's all based on borrowed money, and that's my opinion on that. So I'd love to hear you guys' opinion on this thing. I hope this makes sense. I try to be as nice and clear as possible, but it's a really, really frustrating system we have right now, and that's what it is. So thanks again for watching, everyone, and I'll catch you next video.